welcome to the latest edition of the Football Culture Podcast. For today's episode, we're leaving Europe and we're going to Latin America again, and this time we're heading off to Argentina. Now, today we're going to be discussing a club that is one of the big five, Los Cinco Grandes in Argentina, but it's not River Plate, it's not Boca, it's not Independiente, and it's not Racing. It's San Lorenzo de Almagro, to give them their full name, which, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting football clubs in the world. And today I have a guest with me who is Will Dalton, who has written a new book on the club called O San Lorenzo. So, Will, introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, James. Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm Will. I'm sort of a writer and a copywriter for kind of all my adult life. Lived in Argentina for a couple of years, spent some time in Colombia as well, which I guess has affected some of the things I've done. In particular, the book, as you mentioned, O San Lorenzo, A Journey Through Argentine Football Culture, which is out with Pitch Publishing in October.
Okay, cool. Now, first question is, I know quite a bit about San Lorenzo. A lot of the listeners will, but there will be some listeners who don't really know much about the club. So, first question, why San Lorenzo? Why would you support and write a book about the club?
Well, I was in the same boat once upon a time. It was kind of over a decade ago. I was planning a 6-month spell living in Argentina. So I started checking out the local football teams. And it was San Lorenzo's story which popped out because I've got an unusual parallel with my club here in London, Charlton Athletic, my boyhood team, who I go and follow home and away. Because, in the 1980s, Charlton Athletic, we lost our stadium. We couldn't play in our home neighbourhood. And, it was a fan campaign which had to bring us home in the 90s. It became like a really definitive part of our history and the club in general. And San Lorenzo, I noticed the same had happened to them. Lost their famous old stadium in the middle of Buenos Aires with the club in trouble, became a nomadic team. And they're still looking to get back home to this day. And it's, again, a really defining kind of cause for them and their fans. I thought, that sort of piqued my interest. Then I went to a couple of games when I first arrived in Argentina, and it was sort of instant love, to be honest. It was such a special club, unbelievable atmosphere, all the stories and the kind of, the culture around the supporters and the club itself was just very kind of alluring. And that was it, really. It became a kind of a portal into understanding Argentine football culture more widely, which comes up a lot in the book, beyond San Lorenzo, and I'd say the country Argentina itself. So that was the beginning of it for me.
Okay, great stuff. I've been to San Lorenzo. It is a special club. Okay, so let's go back to the origins of the club then, right in the beginning. So people might think San Lorenzo, St. Lawrence in English, a bit of a strange name for a football club. But it goes back to how the club was formed. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, as you say, it is a good story. It was in the beginning of the 20th century in Buenos Aires, 1907, 1908, and there were kids playing on the street in the barrio of Almagro, the neighbourhood. But it was quite dangerous to play on the streets. There were trams in particular which would go trundling past, as well as some kind of just a lot of sort of traffic, and the streets were quite unsafe. And it was one day the local priest who had the church on the corner saw these children playing. One nearly got hit by a tram. He thought, this isn't ideal. Let's see if I can get the children safely playing in the grounds of the church. He said, chaps, you can play behind the church if you promise to come to Mass on a Sunday. And they did. They started playing, and then more seriously, and started forming their own club called Los Forzosos de Almagro, kind of the strong men, the strong boys of Almagro. That later became San Lorenzo when they officially registered the club. Saint Lorenzo Massa was the priest in question, so they wanted to name the club after him. He didn't want it in his name, so he said, by all means, go with San Lorenzo, but say it's named after the Battle of San Lorenzo, which is one of the Argentine wars of independence, kind of a century before that. They didn't look back. Boedo, which is now the neighbourhood they're associated with, is part of Almagro. It's now a neighbourhood in its own right. Hence, you have San Lorenzo de Almagro, and the cracking backstory with Lorenzo Massa, the priest, as you mentioned.
And even more so in the fact that Pope Francis was a fanatical San Lorenzo fan. From what I read, he genuinely watched games in the Vatican. It was a big part of his life. He had season tickets. He was regularly seen in the stadium. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, his dad actually played for the basketball team back in the day, because obviously the extra kind of sports around Argentine clubs are important. He went to games, and it's just quite a nice sort of symmetry from the origins, I suppose, because Pope Francis is known for his kind of he's quite vocal about social causes, the same things which inspired that priest Lorenzo Massa in the foundation of the club, and that social elements run right through them ever since. So yeah, it's kind of a fitting famous fan to have, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to know if there's any video evidence or photographic evidence of the Pope sat in his San Lorenzo shirt in front of the TV watching maybe the derby against Huracan or against Boca or someone. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so the club had success in the 1930s, but the golden era for San Lorenzo was the late 1960s and early 1970s, wasn't it?
It was indeed. Yeah, they had a sort of a decent spell early 60s with a team known as the Cara Sucias, the Dirty Faces, because as a kind of a core of the team, local Buenos Aires boys who were kind of like played in supposing the style of the kind of the dirty face of street urchin type figure, kind of like brave but like technically very good, scampering around, feisty players. So they were quite famous as a team. But then it was the Los Matadores, the Killers, who became really famous after that in the late 60s and early 70s, because they were the first ever team to have an unbeaten season, first invincibles in Argentina in the professional game. I think they won 4 titles kind of over that spell. And yeah, really kind of defined that era of the club before things went a bit south because of matters off the field.
Yeah, definitely. The Matadors nickname, the chants of San Lorenzo. We'll come on to it a bit later, but San Lorenzo are well known for their chants. And I often have the Dali Matador song stuck in my head. I don't know why, but it just pops in every now and again. If I'm in the gym or whatever. Yeah.
I was walking around the office today, and it's just when you're humming songs, they're just often San Lorenzo songs. It's like, and I always say, like going to games was like going to a gig at times, because they sing the songs sort of over a kind of a long period of time. They're long, elaborate songs, like a verse and chorus, and they get stuck in your head. It's like you're waiting for your favourite songs to come around on the stands. Like it's a brilliant part of that match.
Yeah. It's a little bit like going to a rave. I mean, not quite, but it's just like you go to a match, and I went to 2 matches at San Lorenzo. I liked it so much on the Saturday. I went back on the Tuesday for the Libertadores, and I found myself just like dancing on the terraces along with everyone else. It was just there was young mothers with babies in prams rocking them. On the front of the terrace. It was flat. Kids running around playing football. It was great. It just felt like a party. It was a football match, but it also felt like I was at a festival. So
yeah, that's exactly it. Because those people you mentioned, those kind of front rows with their kids playing football and stuff, they're not even like half of them aren't even watching the game. They can't even see because of the long flags which are hung behind the goal. But they're wearing the shirts and they're there because it is more than watching the 90-minute match. It's this coming together of their friends and their families, and it's there's that shared experience with the atmosphere and just being there, and they have their kind of quite accessible, affordable socio like membership cards, equivalent of a season ticket, I suppose. So they can just go in, and even if they're not taken in the game, they're just happy to be there and enjoying the party.
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend to any listeners, if you want if you go on Music Quevo on YouTube, there's loads and loads of San Lorenzo videos which are worth watching. I remember when I first moved to Seville, there wasn't a lockdown like in the UK. There was like the bars shut at 6 and there was a curfew at 10. So what would happen, you'd go drinking in the afternoon, and then you'd kind of be a little bit half cut, but at a loose end, because you've been out early, because usually you'd go out later. And I found myself often just watching loads of those videos, sat on my bed, you know what I mean? I just think, at home with everywhere closed.
I can fully relate to that. They just kind of hit even harder after a couple of beers, don't they, those songs? And now the guy who runs that channel is great. Actually, I've had a bit of contact with him over the years, because that channel and watching the songs and watching the stands was such a big part of kind of how I got to know the club before going to Argentina, and kind of being sucked in. And I helped him out with some translations for the songs, which he's put on YouTube as well. So
that was you. That was you, was it? Because that helped me with my Spanish. It helped me with my Spanish when I moved to Seville because I could see what the words in Spanish meant in English. Yeah,
Oh, that's very cool. I'm glad to hear it because I had the same in the first instance, but without the English there. So when I was studying Spanish in Argentina, I was logging onto those videos and just kind of putting the lyrics through Translate, and they're coming out with the kind of odd, because obviously the expressions they have over there, the kind of profanities they're using have a very like amusing sort of translations. It comes out strangely, but almost adds to the appeal of these chants, the kind of the phrases they use and stuff. So yeah, no, it was exactly the same as a part of my Spanish learning experience watching Music Cuervo.
Yeah, it's a great channel. I thoroughly recommend it. Okay, so around this period that San Lorenzo was successful, they were playing at a stadium which is a bit of a legendary stadium in Argentine football, the Metro Stadium. Tell the listeners a little bit about this stadium and why it was so important.
Well, it was known as the Wembley of Buenos Aires because it was massive, and it's just like a traditional stadium, big part of the city. In the sort of booming early decades of Argentine football, it was bigger than River's Monumental. It was bigger than Boca's Bombonera, and because of the club doing well, it just became a massive focal point for the city. And as I mentioned, these clubs are all social clubs as well. So people go to the Gasómetro away from match days to play volleyball, to play hockey, maybe to go to tango classes, maybe to study. They had a massive library. It was a huge social hub. But it was made of wood, which kind of added to the kind of charm. Then it became quite dated, and there were kind of plans to sort of modernize the stadiums in Buenos Aires for the World Cup in 1978. And that's when the club came under some pressure from the military junta. They had a bit of tension with them, and they were eventually forced out and kind of effectively evicted from their famous old stadium, which is a tragic tale. And still haven't managed to go back to the site of where the Gasómetro once was. They're playing the Nuevo Gasómetro, the new gasometer, just down the road in the kind of neighbouring neighbourhood. But it's not the same. It's not home. It's a great temporary home. It has been since 1993. But the club and the fans are still desperate to get back to where the Wembley of Buenos Aires once stood. And hopefully that can happen in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I have read somewhere, I'm not sure if I'm 100% right on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but was some of the tension with the dictatorship down to the makeup of the San Lorenzo support? I mean, was there any political affiliations that didn't tie in with, the dictatorship's idea of model Argentinian citizens as far as they were concerned? Was there like any left-wing agitators there, or were they fans part of the intelligentsia or anything?
Yeah, no, you're completely right. There were some kind of vocal Peronist figures, obviously supporters of Juan Perón and the Peronist leftist movement, and they were obviously in the bad books of the military dictatorship. San Lorenzo don't have the same, not as strong a kind of die-in-the-wall Peronist kind of reputation as other clubs, like smaller clubs like Nueva Chicago, who play in the second tier, Chacarita as well. Racing have a bit of that affiliation. Their stadium's named after Perón. But some of the kind of lead figures in the club's Barra Brava were kind of getting Peronist chants going at games. But probably more important than those people was the fact that Las Madres, who are the mothers who had lost their children at the hands of the military dictatorship, who had been effectively part of the disappeared, the 30,000 kind of supposed leftist dissidents, but they were kind of arresting people and disappearing people left, right and centre in that period. The mothers, they protested about the disappearance of their sons. Where are they? They still march in the centre of Buenos Aires to this day, every Thursday. One of their first major protests was done at the Gasómetro in Boedo at San Lorenzo. They held a huge banner on the back of the stand, so the whole of the main road on the La Plata Avenue could read, kind of back, I'm trying to think what the English translation would be, but essentially like, where are our sons? Like, return them with life, alive now. And the fact that was held up at San Lorenzo in their stadium, obviously the military dictatorship wasn't liking any of that. And from that point, the pressure started to be applied. And a lot of people feel that it's kind of their mission to get San Lorenzo out and to kind of trample on the club as much as they could.
Yeah, I mean, for those, some listeners will know, some may not, but the military dictatorship in Argentina at that time was pretty brutal. People were disappearing, bodies were being washed up on the banks of the River Plate in Uruguay, which is where, how the world started realising exactly what was going on. I mean, there's tales of people being thrown out of planes in the middle of the night, all kinds of horrific things. And yeah, I guess the dictatorship are gonna look at stuff that's going on at San Lorenzo, seeing they're in a bit of financial trouble, taking advantage of it. I mean, I believe the stadium was bought for a lot less than what it was worth, no? Or the land.
That was exactly it. They paid kind of less than $1 million for the site. They kind of forced them out. It's kind of, you've got to close this on safety grounds. The club still wanted to return, but their president of the time was essentially threatened by the governor of Buenos Aires. And then, kind of a mysterious shell company was set up. It bought the kind of what was left of the stadium, and for a small fee, and then sold it for something like 10 times the price to Carrefour, the French supermarket, about 3 years later. So made a huge profit from it. The club saw none of the money. It was left homeless, and then a whacking great supermarket was on the site of a famous old stadium for 30 years, 40 years, until only about kind of 5 years ago. So great fun, a great kind of source of insults and derision for San Lorenzo's rivals. They're homeless, and there's a whacking great supermarket where a stadium once was. But obviously very traumatic and desperately sad, not just for the club, but I think for the people of that neighborhood in Boedo and the people of central Buenos Aires who had lost such a important kind of social aspect of their lives and of their neighborhood. And hence there's been such kind of strong feeling of getting back there and almost sort of belatedly having that sense of justice to defy the military dictatorship kind of long after they're gone.
Yeah. Now, the stadium is such a huge, important part of San Lorenzo culture. I mean, a lot of the songs on the terraces are about going back to Boedo and all this kind of thing. And also as well, like when the stadium was sold to Carrefour, wasn't it? And I've got friends in Buenos Aires, like one of them's a Boca fan. He never calls the Gasometro, he always calls it the supermarket.
Yeah.
And he came to the San Lorenzo game with me that I went on the Saturday when I went to a lot of games in Argentina, and he said, "Oh, we're going shopping at the supermarket today."
Yeah.
And I got no skin in the game really, so I'm like laughing along. But at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah. But then I'm thinking, I'm a Bristol City fan, and we call Eastville Rovers old stadium IKEA. It's just, do you know what I mean? So it's just banter in it, but it is desperately sad.
It's desperately sad, but these things, they're fair game for opponents. And River Plate, I mean, all fan bases in Buenos Aires sung it, but River Plate created a song, which is essentially what you say, kind of, I went to a stadium, just found a supermarket, wanted to watch a football match, ended up buying, a pound of fish and all this kind of stuff. And I included that in the book, that's part of Buenos Aires football folklore. And fans still sing about it to this day. That's the first kind of insult that San Lorenzo fans get, even, 50 years later, kind of, where's your stadium? Where's your neighbourhood? But when you're kind of your home and your neighbourhood is such an important part of your identity as an Argentine club, the fact that San Lorenzo got evicted and moved away and don't play there now, and had a supermarket instead of a stadium there is a massive kind of source of piss taking from other fans over there.
I mean, this is the interesting thing about Argentine football culture, because it in some respects is very Latin, but they seem to have developed the British habit of making fun of your rival being the most important thing. So, like, I live in Seville, I got a season ticket Real Betis. You only hear really anti-Sevilla songs when the derby's coming up. There's no singing it away fans with insults. It's all just pro Betis. And it's the same unless it's a derby, it's the same in all the other stands. But Argentina has this really British thing of just like bad-mouthing your opponents as much as possible, whether you're playing them or not.
Yeah, it really is such a key part of every club's kind of fabric and their own identity is who they're not and how much they can insult their rival. As you say, you can be, without playing your kind of classical rival, your derby rival for years. It doesn't matter, they might be in a different league, but you'll sing about them every week. It's captured very well in that Copa 90 documentary. The Derby days, Super Classico, when Boca and River met in the Libertadores final, the Eli Menjum documentary, and he's talking to that Boca cab driver about, you know, how happy he was when River got relegated, and he burst into sort of tears of emotion and joy, just remembering how good that was for him, and how that's just the fantastic dream moment for Boca, better than probably half the trophies they've won, if not more, was the fact that River were relegated in 2011, something that's never happened to Boca. And yeah, it's a massive part of Argentine football culture, and all the kind of, you know, your head-to-head record over the years is recorded, so you can use that against your rival club. You know, famous games from 25 years ago, if you beat someone 5-0 in their own ground, or if there was, you know, a fight or whatever it was, it's recalled and remembered forever. So yeah, the derbies have such strong kind of history and narrative behind them, which is a lot of fun, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it is. It's all part of the fun, as far as I'm concerned as well. Okay, so when San Lorenzo left the Gasometro, I believe, were they just like play? Because you mentioned before you were a Charlton fan, so I'm old enough to remember Charlton when they weren't playing at the Valley. Like, so I got into football when I was a kid, 85, 86 seasons, the first season I remember. So I think that was Charlton's last season, or they'd gone by then. And then they played it up to Park and Sellers Park, but then they went back to the Valley. So I remember reading it when Saturday Comes, the campaign, and all that kind of thing. What did San Lorenzo do in the intervening period? Because the new Gasometro was built in 1993. Did they have a permanent arrangement, or were they just going from ground to ground, or what was the situation there?
They went from ground to ground. I think at the time, that initially they thought they were going to be able to return to their Gasometro. When that became clear they couldn't, it was still under the military dictatorship, when you couldn't stage any kind of protest on the street. Everyone was living in fear. So the club began its kind of nomadic existence for the best part of 15 years, playing in rival grounds, so playing at Huracan, its derby rival, playing some games at Boca. But the fans also tried to turn it into a positive. You know, everything was going wrong at that time. They'd lost the ground. They even got relegated, the first of the big five to ever be relegated. But they played at Vélez Sarsfield Stadium and just started selling it out week after week. Again, much bigger crowds than Vélez, which is a big club, but it's more modest than San Lorenzo. And in the end, the Vélez president thought, this is no good for us, because fans are going to watch San Lorenzo in our stadium. They're loving the party, and they're buying San Lorenzo shirts, and we're losing them. And that was one of the reasons why they stopped playing there. And then San Lorenzo broke records for playing in the Monumental. In the second tier, they played Tigre. They played in River's Monumental Stadium and sold it out. About 75,000 people there for a second tier game. So although they couldn't, all the kind of, I think, the depression and the disappointment and that pent-up anger of losing their home sort of came out in this movement of trying to re-lift the club out from the B, the second tier, and the kind of, just to keep it alive, because it was also destitute in such a bad way. So it's ground hopping around Buenos Aires for about 10, 15 years, and then eventually it had some land which it owned in a neighbouring Bajo Flores neighbourhood, and eventually in 1993 built a stadium there, which does feel like home. It's a good stadium. It holds about 45,000 people. It's in a dangerous area. It's right by a villa, which is the Argentine equivalent of a favela, essentially a slum. And you don't have the kind of the bars and the restaurants and the kind of the lovely feel on the streets which you have in their home of Boedo, which isn't ideal. But it's a home. It's made, and it really does feel like home, and it's a fantastic atmosphere when you go there. But hopefully for the fans, it's just temporary. And in the coming years, it can build the stadium it wants so badly in Boedo.
Yeah, so I went to the new stadium in Bajo Flores, and talking about it being in a dangerous area. So I tried to get a taxi, and I asked every taxi driver Bajo Flores, and he just went no, no. And I was like, I did read up that it wasn't in the best of places. That you've got to be a little bit careful. And eventually I got a taxi driver, and as we approached Bajo Flores, he asked me to put the lockdown in the back for security. I thought, what am I letting myself in for here? But the stadium is great. It does have a bit of a temporary feel about it. Like it feels as if it's kind of like it wasn't built for like the next 60 years or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because there's huge terraces behind the goal. Huge terraces. So if you're like me that remembers the days of big terraces in English football and you really miss them, it's fantastic to go, because it's just like the old days of the whole end and the Kop. They're huge terraces behind the goal, but they're like kind of on stilts at the back. So it kind of feels as if it's sort of like, it's ready to move it somewhere else almost,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's quite a rudimentary sort of structure, isn't it? And it's got the gaps between the stands. I know another insult that opposition fans use, they call it an ashtray, because it's got that kind of shape to it. And I think if you went there in a lot of other places, you go, yeah, this ground doesn't necessarily do that much for me. But the way Argentine fans own their stadiums, the way they sort of dress it up from head to toe, don't they? And all the flags, they have the thraples, the kind of banners, they have the tirantes, those almost like ribbon type things that come down. And you've got all just the colour and carnival they bring to the match days that it just elevates it so much. You go, oh yeah, this is San Lorenzo's home. When you're right, if you see it kind of empty, it does look almost a little bit basic, a bit temporary. But yeah, it's certainly served its purpose. And despite the kind of issues with its location, which means the club usually don't even play at night time if it's a home league match because of security in the area. Apart from those factors, it has become a good home.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. There's a story actually behind it. So I went on the Saturday, and it was a day game. Can't remember who they were playing. It was one of the smaller teams, and it was like a draw. I think San Lorenzo finished bottom that season. Although, just to make the listeners aware, San Lorenzo were relegated for the first of the big five to be relegated, but they'd actually brought in, I don't know if it was an action at that time, but in Argentina, relegation places are decided average points over 3 seasons, basically to stop big clubs like San Lorenzo, River, Boca going down, Racing, Independiente, although Boca's the only one that hasn't gone down, so it hasn't done them any favours, really, apart from Boca. But anyway, and they finished bottom that season, but they weren't in any danger because they had enough points in the bank over the 3 seasons. And then I loved the atmosphere so much, so I went back on the Tuesday because they were playing Phil Scolari's Palmeiras in the Copa de Libertadores. And it was a night game, because it was the Libertadores. And because I'd been there on the Saturday, I thought, this will be all right. And then I didn't realise where I'd bought my ticket. So I bought my ticket in the main stand, and I was a bit late. So all the fans are in the stadium. So there's just me, and I have to approach the main stand by the Vija. And there's quite a few nefarious characters giving me some strange looks. And I'm like, do I go to the stand? So I was like, so I had my phone. I was like, maybe I can just put my phone in my shoe and walk really quickly so no one notices, you know what I mean? As I'm doing these police approach me, wanting to know why I was hanging around outside the stadium, right? So I explained to the police that, well, my ticket's in there and it's a bit dangerous, so I'm not sure whether I should go. And they just went, do you want to go to the match? And I was like, well, yeah. And they said, one moment. And they made a phone call. And then a car from the club picked me up, told me to get in the car. They drove me round to the terrace where the Barras Bravas were, which was not where my ticket was, but it was on the right side of the stadium. And they went, in you go. If you have any problems, I'll be here. Come and see me. So I was like, and I've got enough streetwise knowledge to know, don't go in the middle with the Barras. Sides is okay, just, it's their territory, but, and I had a whale of a time, and I was like, I'm really glad this happened, because I'm actually in the main end now, and it was a lot more fun in there than it was in the main stand, but...
Well, exactly, yeah, well, no, I can relate to it. It's funny, they just make up as they go along, don't they, in terms of the security in the club, but you can get some really nice favours out of it. Like, sometimes it's a total shambles, but it's always a total shambles, but you meet the right person at the right time, they'll see a slightly, concerned gringo, and they go, let's drive him in and put him in the proper home end. Like, it's fantastic, isn't it? But yeah, I know a lot of people just tell you not to go to games because of everything you've said about the area, and I was a bit kind of cautious of that, I guess, when I first started going. But then it almost became uncomfortable for me just how much this huge area, this Villa, was just completely stigmatized by the Argentine people, and it was almost like a metaphorical wall was just like put up between the stadium and this Villa. Like, look the other way, pretend they're not there. They're all wrong-uns, they're all dangerous, this, that, and the other. And I thought, you know what? Like, there was a San Lorenzo player who came through called Tito Villalba. I loved him, loved the way he played, and it's just a classic example of a local lad who was brought up in this really difficult place to live, But like everyone there, just a normal, hard-working person who like deserved a crack at whatever line of work, whatever what he wanted to do in Argentina. And I thought, there's lots of just normal families just trying to live an honest life there, which is obviously the case. And so, yeah, for one chapter in the book, I went in, I wanted to meet the locals, and I met this kind of like this foundation which lays on a load of kind of sports and various activities for children. And yeah, they're lovely people, and they just sort of took me around and met all the kind of neighbours, and yeah, just kind of spent the afternoon there essentially. And it's just a nice sort of confirmation of like, obviously it's dangerous. Obviously you got to keep an eye out for any kind of trouble that spills onto the street, especially on match day, because there's going to be certain people who see that as an opportunity to pickpocket or whatever it is. But like anywhere in the world, you might be growing up in a rough place, but 99% of you are just trying to get by and trying to live your life. So yeah, I was glad I was able to kind of go inside and meet people there, because it is like inside. It's inside and out. It's not like crossing into a normal neighborhood when you don't really know when you're kind of going over the borders of a neighborhood. You're inside. It's a huge, stacked up, kind of sprawling neighborhood. And yeah, you feel like you go through an entrance and suddenly the roads aren't even officials. There's no kind of, some traffic doesn't even go through. They're narrow. The houses are quite ad hoc. There's, there might be like rubbish all over the streets. There's like cables and electric wires hanging down. It's all very kind of like basic and neglected. And so, yeah, and you never would go in without kind of arranging to meet someone or be with someone who lives there. But yeah, there's just sound people in there living normal lives. So I was pleased I did get to see that and include that in the book. And, yeah, as I say, good to be wary, but good to remember that there's normal kind of Buenos Aires residents living there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I would say to anyone who wants to go to a match there, is like, do go, but just be a bit streetwise, just be a bit careful. I mean, my issue at that point was just, it was late at night, there was no one around hardly, apart from the police, who were looking at me going, why is this guy hanging around? Because they thought I was up to something. You know what I mean? So it's just like, and I'm a Geary, or as they say here in Spain, Geary, gringo in Latin America. So it's definitely worth going. Like, in the Villas, yeah, there are going to be some dangerous people in there, but there's going to be some good people in there as well. But another thing that struck me as well, so it was like a police station facing it further down, and it felt almost as if it was like they're keeping them in there. Not, do you know what I mean? It all felt a bit,
very much so. But then the people leading the kind of, I guess, the drug lords and the gang leaders in there will also collaborate a lot with the police. So they'll have zonas liberadas, which are basically kind of, I don't know what the English translation would be, but basically kind of a shut-off zone where the police agree that the people, the kind of the gangsters, the gang leaders can do what they want in a certain area. They'll look the other way, and they can commit all sorts of terrible crimes. And it actually happened, not in Buenos Aires, but in Rosario. It's also included in the book. I was at Rosario Central against San Lorenzo. We're having a relaxed beer and a pizza just 2 blocks from the stadium. And the leader of the Central Barra was shot dead. And we were wondering why, when we were kind of around it, we didn't know at the time. There's no police sirens around. There was no real commotion. Found out the next day it was a Zona Liberada, which these other Barra leaders had collaborated with the police to basically set up this guy, turn out all the street lamps, all the CCTV in the area, but he shut off mysteriously, and they killed him. He was shot dead, and a kind of a power struggle ensued at the top of the Barra Brava in Central. Thankfully, none of that kind of activity has happened in the San Lorenzo Barra in the kind of decade or so I've followed the club. It's been it's been peaceful and organised, and there's actually a lot of people involved with the Barra who have nothing to do with that kind of activity, and just kind of on the spicier side of the support, but are kind of honest blokes just trying to lift the team more than anything else. But there's a darker side which has absolutely nothing to do with football. It all gets kind of led by what's going on in the city and the country at large, I suppose. And that darker side does exist.
So let's give the listeners an idea with regards to Barras Bravas. So in Europe we have ultras. In the UK it's different from ultras, but people would say hooligans, hooligan firms, ultras. In Argentina it's Barras Bravas. So just give us an idea as to what these guys are.
Well, they began very early on, about 100 years ago, as kind of just sort of, as I say, a spicier element of the support, who were often paid by the club to go to home matches and go to away matches just have a bit of presence in the stadium, because you'd often find, referees are getting bought, away teams are getting intimidated, they're getting their water cut off in their changing room, everything's going against them, away trips are a nightmare. And I thought, hang on, we need a few kind of strong men just to kind of have a bit of presence here, put a bit of pressure on the referee behind the goal, be around the ground, look after our own fans who might be making these trips as well. And they sort of became, the vociferous support. They're the people who kind of produce all the colour and the carnival, which you see as well from the drums and the trumpets and the flares and the flags and the banners. But there's always that element which had that kind of, the feistier side, which would be, getting in fights with other Barras brothers of other clubs in a more classic hooligan type way. But then when money started to come into the Argentine game much more in the 80s, but particularly the 90s, they started getting much more of a stake in the club. They'd start taking cuts of merchandise, cuts of, parking spaces outside the stadium, and even kind of helping to get presidents into power. They would lead campaigns, they would pressurize people, like everyday fans, to vote for certain people. And so then they were really in. They'd even get cuts of certain player sales abroad and stuff. And it's a whole money-making enterprise, which obviously gets very far removed from, traditional support and really caring about the club. And so that's why Barras brothers are treated differently. They've got the ultras element, they've got the hooligan element and history, but they've got that slightly insidious part of them as well, in the sense that they're involved with the club, they're involved with the business, and that doesn't really do anyone any favours, does it?
No, it's kind of like, it's almost like a mafia, not quite like a mafia, but it's not just like, but having said that, like the Lazio ultras, who were notorious, they were into all kinds of things, selling drugs, merchandise, ticket touting, very similar to the Barras in Argentina. But it does seem to be a big problem in Argentina, that dark side of it. But I guess it kind of reflects society. Like once upon a time, Argentina was the promised land. The place where people went for a better life, and due to various reasons, we haven't got time to go into now, is kind of like there's numerous economic problems, and it all went wrong decades ago, and they've never really been able to turn it around. And this is sort of given opportunity for these kind of people to thrive, unfortunately.
Absolutely, no, I think that's completely right. And I think in a country that suffers, and you feel like you haven't got a clear pathway to kind of make a living and do well, illicit activities and dark ways of getting your money are always going to come about. And in Rosario, for example, it's very much related to the drug trade. It's by the river Paraná, and loads of drug shipments come through that. And so really it's the gangs in the city who are operating in that way in a struggling country, which then seep into the clubs, rather than it's not the everyday football fan which wants to just finds themselves in these activities. It's all separate, but very much reflects society and the wider problems rather just terrorist problems.
So that's the dark side, but there is a light side, and it's San Lorenzo. The fan culture, in my opinion, is quite superb. It is all over Argentina, but the matches I went to, I was jumping up and down, singing with the fans, and they were very friendly as well. Now, there's a lot of football songs all around, certainly around Spain, that have their origins in San Lorenzo. So, for example, I have a season ticket Real Betis. The Loco in the La Cabeza song is sang with words related to Real Betis. Dali Betis. There's a good 4 or 5 songs at Real Betis that have origins at San Lorenzo. What is it about San Lorenzo's fan base that is coming up with these brilliant songs? Why isn't it, I don't know, Independiente fans or River or whatever? Do you know what I mean? What is it about San Lorenzo, do you think, that gives rise to
about this? Yeah, because it is interesting. You're right, and even other fans of those clubs will admit that. The San Lorenzo supporters are the most creative. They've had this long-standing reputation of starting all these songs and a lot of other kind of customs of the terrace. And I've asked people, and a lot of people put it down to Boedo, that home neighbourhood where the old stadium was and where the club was born, and what it still kind of represents the club, because it was a traditional Buenos Aires barrio of the arts. It was kind of working class, lower middle class, but still drenched in the arts in terms of tango clubs, in terms of street art and murals, in terms of writers. There's a very famous literary collective, Grupo de Boedo, from the barrio, and people think that kind of culture seeped in to the support and the match-going fan. And so, yeah, that kind of creativity came into kind of how they're creating chants. And yeah, it just became a full thing. Someone told me that San Lorenzo fans are born with a DNA for making songs. They all have that kind of dream, and they'll hear like pop songs or hear old rock songs and think, how would that sound in San Lorenzo's ground? And interesting, there are lots of like band members and kind of artistic kind of cultural figures and celebrities in Argentina who are San Lorenzo supporters. There is a sort of relationship there. And perhaps that's what's kind of imbued the club and its fan base with that creativity. Because, as you say, I love it when I've got no idea about a song that I hear all the time at San Lorenzo, and then I see it on YouTube at somewhere like Betis or wherever it is. You go, wow, it's not just travelled to the other clubs in Buenos Aires or the other clubs in Argentina or South America. It's travelled the world. And even clubs in England take certain chants from Argentina, and so many of those chants in Argentina started in San Lorenzo. So, yeah, it's a really cool thing that the club's got.
Yeah, I must admit, fellow Beticos do get a bit annoyed with me, but it's true. I do say, yeah, it's good, but the San Lorenzo version is a bit better. You know,
I know what you mean. They sing a bit slower. Argentines are very good at singing. Sometimes you can't make sense of it in the stadium. Sometimes they're all, I don't know, they're kind of stoned, they're drunk, they're flailing all over about kind of on one. These blokes behind the goal, they start singing, and it's so melodic. And there is like a verse and chorus. There's the full band that goes with it. And they sing, kind of just slowly. They let the songs breathe, which you definitely don't get in England, and I don't think you get it in Spain so much either, or Italy. They chant very quickly. And so, you feel like you're singing along to your favourite songs. And even in Colombia, I've been to a fair few games there at different clubs, and they copy a lot of songs from Argentina. They have a brilliant fan culture, again, pure carnival, great atmosphere. But their pitch of how they sing doesn't sound quite right. And again, it's a bit quicker, and it doesn't have the same deep atmospheric quality of the Argentines. And yeah, you see it on YouTube videos, and you can feel it when you're there. It's something quite special.
Yeah, it's definitely worth going to a match. Get it on the bucket list. Okay, so San Lorenzo though they sing about returning to Boedo, and there are plans in the future to do so. Is that correct?
There are plans indeed. Yes, it's been a campaign that's been going on a while. One part of it was to kind of remove Carrefour, the supermarket, raise the funds to buy back the territory. Was the fans could buy a symbolic metre square of that turf in Buenos Aires. I bought my metre square kind of 10 years ago when I was first getting to know the club, and all the kind of campaigns to kind of get the land reattributed to the club via the city government, and also to raise funds to get rid of Carrefour. That all succeeded, and there's now a rectangular patch vacated, empty in Boedo, ready for the stadium to be built. But things are never that simple in Argentina, and with the kind of the economic problems in the country, and then the economic problems which are a much deeper, more exaggerated version at San Lorenzo. It's a mess of a club at the moment, sadly. They just haven't got the funds or the plan to go ahead with the crucial next step of actually building the stadium. So even in my time, the last 10 years, it's been great to see, what was once a huge supermarket on this site and kind of graffiti outside. San Lorenzo will return one day, we'll turn to this holy ground. And then I go there now to Buenos Aires, and it's gone. It's empty. There's no supermarket there. And that's a huge French multinational. Like it's a major company they've managed to defeat just from fan campaigns, essentially. Now the campaign's gone more towards the club rather than the fans, and that's when they've lost a bit of momentum, and the club hasn't succeeded in getting that plan together for the stadium. So, it's been felt like hopefully within the next 3 to 5 years there will be works on the stadium. That's been the case ever since I've supported them, and that still goes on really. But given the chaos at the club at the moment behind the scenes and the horrendous debts they have, it certainly doesn't feel imminent, but it will definitely happen one day. I just hope it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I don't think Javier Melli is much of a football fan, so I doubt they can rely on any help from him. I think that Carrefour was removed by the previous government. I know they weren't very popular, but I think they'd done that.
Yeah, well, there's some. If there was some kind of like private investment from outside, Millet would be probably keen for that. He's keen for that to come into the Argentine games. They're fan-owned social clubs at the moment. He wants kind of them to be open to investment. And weirdly, I think he's a football man because he started. He was once on Chacarita's books as a goalkeeper.
Okay.
So he feels a million miles from how he talks about the game and how he is as a man. He seems a million miles away from your kind of your everyday Argentine football supporter. But yeah, I don't think he'll give a hoot about what happens to a club like San Lorenzo, to be honest.
No, very true. Maybe he should have stuck to goalkeeping and done everyone a favour. But well, that's my opinion. But it's all about, yeah. Other opinions are available, just not mine. Okay, so San Lorenzo, compared to a lot of other clubs, have quite a few nicknames, don't they?
They do. They've got loads. El Ciclón might be the most common, the cyclone, a nice kind of antidote to the hurricane, Huracán, being their local rivals. There's also Los Cuervos, El Cuervo, the crow, which is not directly related to the bird, but actually to the priest who we mentioned earlier. He founded the club, and the long black gowns that the Catholic priests wear, which looks like a crow from behind, in the eyes of the Argentines at least. So there's that. There's Los Matadores, which you mentioned earlier, which came from their Invincibles team of the 60s and just stuck around as a nickname. Los Santos, you hear now and again, the Saints. Los Gauchos de Boedo, the Gauchos of Boedo, the barrier. There's loads, but the ones you'll always hear are El Ciclón, the cyclone, and El Cuervo, the crow. And there's other kind of, various sort of sub-nicknames around it. But, yeah.
This is good. The more nicknames, the better. In Bristol City, we've only got one, the Robins, so could do it a few more.
Charlton have had a bit of that. We've had Robins. We've had a few sub-nicknames as well, though I think we've settled on the Addicts. We had the Robins, we had the Valiants, but it's all part of the kind of the texture of a club, isn't it? So yeah, it's nice that San Lorenzo have got a few to play with.
Yeah, our friends Bristol Rovers have given us another nickname, but it's not one we're particularly keen on. But there you go. Yeah. Okay, so we touched on the rivalry with Hurricanes. So, Los Cinco Grandes, the big five. But unfortunately, it's not very even when it comes to a derby. So we've got Boca and River, everyone knows about, the Super Classico, huge rivals. Independiente and Racing share the same neighbourhood. Stadiums are very close together, so they're huge rivals. And that kind of leaves San Lorenzo a little lonely in terms of the very biggest clubs. So they've got a rivalry with Hurricane. So tell us a little bit about the rivalry between that one. Maybe a little bit lopsided, not in terms of hatred, but in terms of size, as it were.
It is, yeah. Hurricane haven't been very successful in the history. With San Lorenzo is one of the Grandes, a very decorated club. And yes, as San Lorenzo fans, always reminding Hurricane of the fact how kind of insignificant they are in the history of Argentine football compared to San Lorenzo. But it is a special derby in the sense that it's known as the Clásico de Barrio, the neighbourhood derby, and has a very traditional feel in that sense because they are right next to each other. Boedo, the barrio of San Lorenzo, and Parque Patricios, the barrio of Huracán. And yeah, they're two very classically porteño, kind of Buenos Aires style neighbourhoods in terms of the cobbled streets, the lower buildings, the tango clubs. You still see little kind of remnants of this now. And yeah, from the very beginning, being side by side, they had that very fierce local rivalry. And yeah, you speak to people like San Lorenzo fans involved with the Barra Brava, and they can't even walk 10 blocks down the road to Parque Patricios and where Huracán is because of the kind of the needle between the two clubs. It's pretty fierce. But yeah, in many ways, a convenient derby for San Lorenzo because, as you probably know, in Argentina, but they like to kind of play the Clásicos, the derbies, as much as possible. And you often play a second fixture. You'll play everyone in a round robin, but you'll play your Clásico rival twice. So while all those big boys like Boca and River are playing each other twice against, great teams, we've got Huracán twice, which historically means kind of two easier fixtures and 6 points in the bank. It's leveled out a little bit in the last sort of 5 to 10 years in San Lorenzo's struggles. It's been a lot of draws and Huracán nicking a few. But as I say, they like to count the head-to-head records over the years. San Lorenzo are about 35 games to 40 games up on Huracán in the history. And yeah, that's it's the most lopsided derby in Argentina because of that record.
Yeah, definitely. Although when I went to San Lorenzo game in the Argentine Premier Division, went to Independiente in a taxi straight after because they were playing, and we drove past the Huracan Stadium, which is absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful from the outside. It looks great inside. It's like an Art Deco stadium, and it's got quite a big capacity as well. So it always seems to be like Huracan, not very successful on the pitch compared to, say, San Lorenzo, but you kind of look at that stadium and think someone thought they might be, or they were, but it just something went wrong, you know.
No, that's exactly it, and I think they can still use it. That's how they stay in the argument with San Lorenzo fans, that they've got this beautiful stadium, they've got the home they've never moved from, and I can't really feel any anger because, as an outsider, I do consider myself a San Lorenzo fan. It will never be the same as my love for Charlton, but it's a very strong passion, and I am absolutely a Cuervo these days. But I can't really take on that Huracan rivalry like a local would. I think it would be disingenuous and a bit sort of false. I think they're a kind of a commendable like mid-weight club with decent support, much more similar to like Charlton than San Lorenzo are, for example. And why I guess like a lot of San Lorenzo fans actually kind of feel the games with Boca a bit more, because as an outsider you can go to Argentina but you can get annoyed by Boca quite quickly. They're omnipresent. They've got the beautiful kit, they've got the beautiful stadium, they've got the great history. I can see why we all have that allure towards Boca as outsiders. But when you're there, they're annoying. You can't get away from them. They've got incredible elements of self-importance because they effectively run the Argentine game alongside River. There's always kind of underhand activity happening with referees and the press and all sorts. And so San Lorenzo is the only club that's got a kind of superior head-to-head record against Boca, the only club in the whole of Argentina. So that's become a nice sort of secondary derby. And yeah, I feel I've seen a few San Lorenzo Boca games, and I went to a cup competition. We played them in a Super Cup final in Cordoba in central Argentina when they had Tevez up front and Gago in midfield, and we spanked them 4-0. And it was superb. It was up there with some of my best Charlton memories because you feel like you're taking on the big boys, and we gave them a proper hiding, and it felt amazing. We had probably about 20,000 fans that trolled up from Buenos Aires. They hit the rest of the stadiums, another kind of 40,000 or so. You're outnumbered. There's millions of Boca fans all over the country. The whole country's talking this constant Boca and River narrative. And when you can kind of lay one on them and beat them, it feels great. So I personally enjoy that one more than the Huracan derby.
Yeah, so I noticed this. So my friends that are Boca fans in Buenos Aires, like obviously they hate River, but I was picking up from them that if there was another team that they really disliked after River, it was San Lorenzo. And I couldn't really work out why. I was like, well, why? Why not Racing or Independiente? Do you know what I mean? It was like...
Yeah. It'll be because of that record, their terrible history with San Lorenzo, and the only club that hasn't managed to dominate in the head-to-head. And my friends in the days when away fans were allowed in grounds in Argentina to talk about the kind of routine visit to the Bombonera to see San Lorenzo win. You get the top two tiers behind the goal, so what's that, probably about 5, 6, 7,000 fans. You see San Lorenzo win, San Lorenzo could be lost in mid-table, Boca about to win the title, and San Lorenzo win again. They've just got this kind of Midas touch when it comes to that Classico, and I think that's kind of fueled a lot of angst in the Boca side when they feel like they should be beating San Lorenzo, and they so often don't. So that probably is their next biggest game after River.
Yeah, I feel a little like that when it comes to Villarreal over here, and Bristol Rovers in the 80s, but that's another story. So does San Lorenzo have any other rivals with any other clubs then? So we've got Huracan, Boca. I mean, is there a general rivalry with the other Grandes, or are there any other local clubs they don't get on with? Or
it would be between the Grandes. So Racing definitely comes next. There's quite a close head-to-head rivalry between San Lorenzo and Racing over the years. So that's always got a bit more needle than Independiente, which is the kind of... They don't seem to wind up many teams generally Independiente. They probably have the most placid support of the Big Five. But yeah, a game against them is still a big local derby and an important fixture. Beyond that, it would probably go to... It probably starts coming out of the friendships that fan bases have with each other. And San Lorenzo have an historic friendship, which is a bit on and off with Rosario Central. And because of that, Newell's Old Boys becomes quite a big game for San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo fans go up there, and maybe Central fans will put on a barbecue for the San Lorenzo fans and be like, "Come on, boys, like, good luck against Newell's," and that creates a bit of needle. Likewise, there's a friendship with Union, who is in Santa Fe. Their derby rival is Colón. Colón has a friendship with Huracán, so that becomes another kind of extra rivalry for San Lorenzo. But really, it's focused on Huracán, Boca, and then kind of Racing behind those. And Vélez, actually, I should mention Vélez Sarsfield. They've had their rivals kind of maybe a bit like Bristol City with Rovers, just kind of lost down the league pyramid. And Vélez almost kind of looking for a rival. In the 90s, they became one of the big boys, really. They won the Libertadores, they won the Club World Cup. And although they're kind of a more local neighbourhood team, they've got this aspiration to be a grande. And they would argue with Huracán about who is the sixth grande. And so in that vein, Vélez have kind of looked for a Clásico with San Lorenzo, and they'll sing lots of songs about San Lorenzo, even though they're not reciprocated. But that still created a nice bit of needle. So that's another good fixture to look out.
What's your opinion on the sixth grande then? Because this is quite an interesting question. So you've got these are the clubs I'd say would be with a shout from my knowledge. So I'd say you've got obviously Vélez because they've won Libertadores titles. They've got quite a big stadium. Blah blah blah. Huracán, okay, not so much on the pitch, but a nice stadium, quite good support. The Rosario clubs maybe Rosario Central, Newell's, possibly Estudiantes. Is there anyone else or?
They would be the ones in the conversation. I think Central and Newell's should be, definitely because of their support, should be in the conversation. They're ridiculous fan bases, but they just haven't been successful enough. So I think you probably have to look at, it depends, the kind of, that's why these arguments are kind of enjoyable, because there's no correct answer. Do you put the weight on the support and the history, or do you put it on titles? And they will count every single League Cup, Charity Shield, any kind of title that you can mention Argentina will get tallied up. And Estudiantes have done well in that respect with the more minor titles, but more so that the 4 Libertadores they've got. 4 Libertadores is a huge thing. And I think although you play them, they don't feel they've got the same support as the Rosario teams. Estudiantes, because of that history, I think probably makes them the biggest candidate for that 6th spot.
Yeah, it's interesting on how you base the size of a club. So, for example, in Spain, Real Betis is the 4th biggest club in Spain in terms of membership numbers, socios. But then Sevilla fans would turn around and say, you're not even the biggest club in this city because you don't have 7 European trophies. You've only made 1 European final and you lost 4-1 to Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, and then they're like, Sevilla fans can also say, and you spend way too much time in the 2nd division. Yeah. So it's like, how do you measure it? And we had this conversation with Miguel Pereira talking about his book on Spanish football, and then it's just like, is it Bilbao, is it Valencia as after the top 3 in Spain as the 4th biggest club, and it's just like his answer was Athletic Club from Bilbao based on trophies won and level of support, which they had both, whereas sort of Betis had a bigger level of support in terms of members, but not the trophies that they had.
Kind of. Fair shout. You can't. They both come into the mix, don't they? There was someone wrote an incredible article, Medium, an English bloke, ranking the English clubs. He created a formula to basically put together all those factors we've discussed, but with certain weightings. So historic league ranking, titles, stadium support, historic support, all these things. He created a formula which is very kind of logical and mapped out the kind of the 92 that way. And I liked it because I think Charlton were above Millwall and Palace, our kind of local derbies, which is how it should be. And but yeah, because it's all those things, isn't it? And then it just is up to the individual what weighting you put on each one. You need a combination of all of them. You can't have a big team without the fan base, but you probably can't have it without a few titles in the cabinet as well, can you? You could
then throw in another thing you could say, as a critique, you used to say, but how do you count these things for London clubs? Because London clubs are always going to have more of a pull for a player, because they're on good money and they get to live in the capital. And if you're on good money and you live in London, then that's perfect, But
then we go the other way around. And if a team up north is getting a packed house every week, we go, well, there's nothing to do up north. There's one team in the town and everyone goes to watch their team. We're in London. We're competing with 15 other clubs and all these other attractions. So it works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, a la Burnley. I think they have the highest percentage of the population of the town that attend matches. And I've been to Burnley, and I'm kind of like, there's a swimming pool, a cinema, a couple of pubs, and Turf Moor. So it's like, well, you just go to Turf Moor, don't you? I mean, it's just like, you know.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely. So what experiences do you have then? So obviously you were going to home games when you're living in Buenos Aires. You know, what did you do travel-wise? You went to Rosario. Was there any other great experiences you had with San Lorenzo?
I'd say my favourite in Argentina was probably that Cordoba trip I mentioned. So Cordoba, second city in the middle of the country, essentially a final against Boca. So a great trip up there. It was fantastic. So there's two sets of fans in the ground. As we sort of hinted at, the away fans have been banned in Argentina for over 10 years. They're sort of dripping back now with a few experimental games. But that ban was largely in place when I was there. But thankfully in cup competitions, they would let both sets of fans in the ground. So they were essentially I'd always travel to those. And even a friendly against Boca in La Plata, for example, is a packed house and like a febrile atmosphere because everyone was allowed in. So that was great fun. But I'd say, beating Boca in a final in Cordoba was pretty special, and that's a very cool city. I went away in the Copa Sudamericana, which is the equivalent of the Europa League, when we played Palestino in Chile. And obviously that's a very cool club with its history, set up by the Palestinian diaspora in Santiago, which is surprisingly big. One of the biggest diasporas outside of the Middle East. I think the biggest is in Chile. So it's those of interesting things you learn, isn't it, on those kind of trips. And then beyond that, probably the Club World Cup, because by winning the Libertadores in 2014, I was lucky to go to most of those matches. We qualified for the Club World Cup in Morocco. And I was living back in London. So, a 3-hour flight compared to what it was for the Argentines felt very accessible. So I took some of my pals here, my brother and two good mates, and we saw San Lorenzo against Auckland and then Real Madrid in the final. And as you probably know, it's a huge deal for Latin American fans, isn't it, the Club World Cup? It's always been their opportunity to take on the big boys from Europe. They started the Copa Libertadores as a way to kind of have a champion to take on Europe in this fixture, formerly the Intercontinental Cup. And so because of that, you had 14,000 Argentines, San Lorenzo fans, travelling all the way to North Africa from Buenos Aires while the country was in economic meltdown, kind of literally paying their life savings to make the journey. And then so being in a city like Marrakesh, which I didn't know myself and never been before, in the kind of the narrow souks and the chaos of that, with this kind of invasion of Argentines sort of clutching their mate cups and their thermos underarms while like motorbikes are like roaring past and people are selling in the street. It was like pure chaos. It's a chaotic city as it is Marrakesh, with 14,000 Argentines. It's another thing altogether. And they're doing their banderazos, their big kind of sort of pre-match sort of team lifting parties in the main square. The Moroccans are joining in with the San Lorenzo songs, and it was incredible. That was an amazing experience, and that gets a chapter in the book naturally as well. Met some friends for life on that trip as well, and they were kind of dumbfounded as why are 4 English blokes wearing San Lorenzo shirts, and why have they travelled to another continent to watch us? And then they were kind of quite taken aback by that, but it really gets conversations going and creates some memorable trips, that's for sure.
Yeah, so San Lorenzo, was it 2014 they won their first Libertadores? Yeah. So it's quite curious, really. They were the last of the grandes to win it, weren't they?
They were. It was a real kind of monkey on their back for sure. And there's another kind of source of insults for other clubs towards San Lorenzo. Always mocked for not being a true grande, for not having that Libertadores. And I was sort of blissfully unaware of that. I became a fan about a year before in 2013. Oh, cool, go to some Copa Libertadores games, they're equivalent of the Champions League. What an atmosphere, what fun, taking on the big teams from Brazil. And obviously early on in that, I realised, with San Lorenzo, I've never actually won this competition before. And I realised why it was so kind of followed so fervently and why the atmosphere was so intense for those games, because they were trying to make history. And in the end, they did. By the time they came around to semi-finals, I was back home in the UK, so I was kind of watching at 3 o'clock in the morning here at home. But a really kind of magical, historic moment for the club winning that Libertadores and then going to the Club World Cup. And just coincidentally, when I just started becoming a supporter, so I was quite lucky in that respect. Yeah, it was a
good time to start. I think didn't they ask the Pope before the final of the Libertadores to pray for them, and he said I can't do that because it's not fair on the other team. Yeah. You know, it's not right for me to ask God, even though I hope you win it. It's not right for me to ask God for it to happen. If He wills it to happen, it will happen. And then Didn't they take the trophy to the Vatican so we could see it, and there's a picture of him with a big smile on his face getting to touch it.
Yeah. They took the trophy over to him. Yeah, no, he had to keep his professionalism, didn't he? But often Argentine fans would go and visit the Vatican and try to get a glimpse of the Pope and wave a San Lorenzo shirt or scarf at him, and he'd offer like a "Que gane San Lorenzo," come on San Lorenzo. So he would let the professionalism slip sometimes, but had to stay diplomatic but very nice to see the club going over there with the trophies to present them to him. Is very fun.
Yeah, he also used to indicate the result with his fingers during mass or something as well, and it's just like, I love that. It's just it
would remind you that he was just a very normal bloke, which has been, I think, hard for us to see as in popes. Do you know what I mean? Because of the pomp and ceremony around it and the kind of formalities that come with the Catholic Church and everything like that. But he was every inch, he did all that, but he was every inch the bloke from Flores, which is a barrio just down from San Lorenzo in Buenos Aires. Normal bloke, played football, as I say, Dad was involved with the club, played sports there as well. And he carried that through to his death, which was why I think he was so kind of liked and appreciated, like kind of regardless of whether you're a Catholic or not.
Yeah, definitely. I quite liked him. The football collection, I thought, was a bit the icing on the cake there. I did. That was good to see. Okay, so at the moment, I've noticed, following from afar, San Lorenzo haven't been doing too well in recent years. Often quite low down the table, not challenging for anything at the moment. What's been the cause of that, and what do you think the future is for the club?
Yeah, it's been an awful period. I was very lucky when I lived in Argentina, kind of competing for titles and playing in continental competitions, and it was brilliant. And since I've been watching from afar, I still go back kind of most years and take in sort of 3 or 4 games if I can. But it's been a lot less a lot worse on the pitch than before. And I think basically the chaos behind the scenes has just seeped onto the pitch. The previous regime got in horrendous debts, paying players in dollars, which is a dangerous game in the Argentine economy. Agents running the show and bringing in loads of players, again on big contracts that were probably unrealistic. And then the debts have mounted. There've been embargoes put on the club to not sign more players. There's been presidents ousted, presidents coming back. It's been a shambles. And so, it's been very hard for the club to do anything on the pitch with that backdrop. It was the only club in the whole of the Primera which didn't sign a single player in the last transfer window, but they effectively can't. They're relying on academy players at the moment. That's about half the team. And so, it's been a very tricky period. And I think until they get a new kind of president, which is something that's happening right now, there's a meeting today where they're trying to oust the current president. It's hard to see much of a future there. It's one of the few times you'd probably like, a wealthy foreign buyer to come in and take the club and put it on a steadier footing, which could happen in the UK. But, I'm so glad that's not the case in Argentina. They are fan-owned. The presidents come and go in elections, which I think is a wonderful thing. So it might be frustrating for San Lorenzo at the moment, trying to sort out their system outside of an election cycle. But, it's going to be very tricky to get the guy Moretti out, but I think that's what has to happen for anything to be built on the pitch.
Yeah, well, let's hope they get it right and they get the stadium in Viedo, the Papa Francis Stadium, as they want to call it.
That's
Pope
the dream.
the Pope Francis Stadium in his honour, if they get back there. So that'd be really good to see. And I haven't been able to in the last 5 years or so for various reasons, but I'd love to get back out of Buenos Aires again. So I'd like to go visit them when they're in their new stadium. That'd be nice. That'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's been great chatting about San Lorenzo on this episode. Now, your book is called Oh San Lorenzo, and just tell the listeners where they can get that and when it's out.
So it's out on the 27th of October. It's available on Waterstones, Amazon, perhaps a couple of other sites as well if you search Oh San Lorenzo online. And get plenty about the club, but plenty about Argentine football culture in general, lots of ground hopping to other places around the country. So, by all means, pre-order if it's of any interest.
Yeah, I would enlist us to do so. I always thought someone should do a book on San Lorenzo, and you've done it. So I can't wait to read it, and I'll definitely be getting a copy when it's released.
Great stuff. Thanks, James.
Okay, so good luck with the book, and thanks for being on the podcast on this episode. And to the listeners, if you can like, subscribe, etc. We're on all the social media, and tell your friends as well, and any reviews are greatly received. Thanks very much to Will, and speak to you on the next episode.